that Baldoni's lawyer has been doing the rounds today, but Lively's legal team has not.
Worse and worse for Blake Lively. And the reason it's going to get worse and worse is people are going to be more comfortable telling the truth.
To try to take down Baldoni and save Blake Lively's career.
Call me when you can. Not urgent, but Blake is asking us to destroy some of the dailies. I want to tell you what we will and won't do. That sentence, taken from an internal email that surfaced during the legal dispute surrounding It Ends With Us, quickly became one of the most discussed pieces of evidence in the case. Online commentators argued that it raised serious questions about what was happening behind the scenes. But as with many court filings, the context matters just as much as the wording. According to the documents, the email was sent by a Sony Pictures marketing executive to another senior Sony executive after discussions involving requests related to production materials. The phrase immediately ignited speculation across social media because, in filmmaking, dailies are the original, unedited footage captured during production. For those unfamiliar with the industry, dailies are essentially the raw recordings made each shooting day. They include alternate takes, rehearsals, and moments before and after scenes are filmed. Because they preserve events as they happened, they can become important evidence whenever disputes arise over what occurred on set. When Blake Lively filed legal claims against her It Ends With Us co-star and director Justin Baldoni, the public narrative initially centered on her allegations. Major media coverage presented the dispute as a workplace misconduct case, and many people accepted that version of events before the litigation had progressed. Blake alleged that she had raised concerns about conduct during production and that those concerns were formally documented. The lawsuit generated enormous public attention, and Justin Baldoni faced widespread criticism as the case unfolded. At that stage, much of the public discussion focused on Blake's allegations rather than the evidence that would later emerge through the legal process. As discovery continued, however, additional documents, including internal emails, text messages, and other communications, became public. Those filings prompted supporters of Justin Baldoni to argue that the dispute was more complex than early headlines suggested. Among the most widely discussed documents was the email referencing the dailies, which quickly became a focal point of online debate. The significance of that email depends heavily on its full context and the legal arguments surrounding it. While some commentators interpreted it as evidence of an attempt to remove potentially important footage, others noted that disputes over handling production materials can involve routine legal, contractual, or archival issues. The email alone does not establish wrongdoing, and its meaning has been contested by the parties involved. What is clear is that the release of additional court documents shifted public attention away from the initial headlines and toward the underlying evidence, leading many observers to revisit their earlier assumptions about the case. According to later court filings, an internal Sony email dated September 3rd became one of the most closely examined documents in the legal dispute. The email referenced a request concerning the film's dailies, the raw, unedited footage recorded during production, and quickly became a focal point of public discussion. Because dailies can preserve behind-the-scenes interactions and alternate takes, they may become relevant evidence in litigation. As a result, any discussion about preserving or disposing of that material naturally drew significant attention. Online commentators argued that the email raised important questions, while others cautioned that a single internal communication does not, by itself, establish the intent behind the request. The timing also attracted scrutiny. Around the same period, Blake Lively's legal team had obtained discovery. Materials that reportedly included communications involving individuals working with Justin Baldoni's public relations team. As the legal battle intensified, both sides expanded their litigation strategies, and public interest in the case continued to grow. Supporters of Justin Baldoni argued that any attempt to limit access to production footage would have benefited Blake's legal position if the recordings supported Baldoni's account of events. Blake's supporters, however, disputed that interpretation, emphasizing that the litigation involved numerous legal and evidentiary issues beyond a single email. One of the central claims made by Baldoni's supporters is that additional copies of the production footage were preserved elsewhere, meaning the material was not lost even if requests regarding certain copies had been discussed. Those claims became part of the broader legal dispute as both parties continued exchanging evidence through the discovery process. Claims that Blake Lively knowingly gave false testimony under oath are serious allegations. Whether any particular deposition answer was inaccurate, misleading, or legally constituted perjury is ultimately a matter for the court to determine based on the full evidence and applicable law, not public speculation. As with the rest of the case, isolated excerpts from testimony should be considered in the context of the complete record rather than as standalone proof of wrongdoing. As more filings became public, the litigation shifted away from competing public narratives and increasingly centered on documentary evidence, witness testimony, and legal arguments that both sides presented before the court. As the legal battle continued, Justin Baldoni's attorney, Brian Friedman, shifted the focus toward documentary evidence. Rather than responding only through public statements, Baldoni's legal team relied on court filings and materials they argued contradicted key portions of Blake Lively's allegations. One of the most widely discussed pieces of evidence was the release of unedited footage from a dance sequence featured in It Ends With Us. Baldoni's legal team maintained that the raw video, together with production audio recorded during filming, provided important context for what occurred on set. Blake's legal team, however, disputed that interpretation, arguing that short clips or individual scenes did not capture the entirety of her workplace concerns. Ultimately, the significance of that footage is a matter for the legal process rather than public opinion. The dispute also extended to documents referenced in the lawsuit. Court filings questioned the timeline surrounding a list of workplace complaints that Blake alleged had been presented during a production meeting. Baldoni's attorneys argued that metadata associated with later versions of the document raised questions about when certain files were created. Blake's legal team disputed those characterizations, and competing interpretations of the evidence became part of the litigation. Additional allegations surfaced regarding communications involving Taylor Swift and her representatives. Court filings and media reports described claims that Blake's legal team sought public support from Swift during the dispute. Those allegations have been strongly contested, and claims that anyone threatened to release private messages or demanded deletion of communications remain disputed rather than established facts. No court has made a final finding that such conduct occurred. Reports also suggested that Blake Lively and Taylor Swift's friendship had cooled during the controversy, citing unnamed sources familiar with the situation. Neither Blake nor Taylor has publicly confirmed the details of their private relationship, making much of the reporting speculative. As more evidence entered the public record, the case evolved from a battle of competing narratives into a complex legal dispute involving emails, text messages, production footage, metadata, witness testimony, and sharply conflicting interpretations from both sides. With litigation of this scale, many of the most serious allegations remain contested until the courts reach final conclusions based on the complete evidentiary record. As the legal dispute drew closer to trial, the public conversation became increasingly polarized. Supporters of both Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni pointed to different pieces of evidence, each arguing that the record supported their side. By that stage, the case had become less about headlines and more about emails, production materials, witness testimony, and competing legal interpretations. Claims involving Blake's friendship with Taylor Swift also fueled intense media coverage. Reports and court filings referenced alleged disagreements over private communications, but many of the most dramatic accusations remain disputed. Neither the existence nor the interpretation of those alleged communications has been conclusively established in court, and both the legal and public narratives continue to evolve. Eventually, the litigation concluded through a settlement rather than a final trial verdict. Because settlements typically resolve disputes without a judicial finding on the underlying allegations, they do not determine who is ultimately right or wrong. They simply bring the legal proceedings to an end under mutually agreed terms. Even after the case concluded, the controversy continued to shape public opinion. Some observers argued that the documents released during litigation strengthened Justin Baldoni's position, while others maintained that the full picture was more complicated than internet commentary suggested. As with many high-profile celebrity disputes, public perception often shifted long before every legal question had been answered. Perhaps the biggest takeaway is broader than any one celebrity. High-profile legal battles are increasingly fought in two arenas at once, inside the courtroom and across social media. Emails, text messages, videos, and court filings can dramatically influence public opinion, but isolated documents rarely tell the entire story. Context, corroborating evidence, and judicial review remain essential before drawing firm conclusions. Whether this case is ultimately remembered as a cautionary tale about media narratives, the importance of preserving evidence, or the risks of trying complex legal disputes in the court of public opinion will likely remain a subject of debate for years to come.